The Idol Hero, Songstress, by DrgnMstr. Chapter 6, A Series of Firsts. Trigger warning on this chapter for talk of depression and mention of suicidal ideation. So if any of those things are triggering for you, please do whatever is necessary for yourself to stay safe. With that being said, let's go ahead and start the chapter. This will be a bit of a longer one, so y'all strap in. The following Monday, Izuku's life underwent the first of many changes. As he disembarked the train and made his way down the streets, he tried to quell his nervousness by reviewing what he had been told by the new school. The Kame school system was a private, half-boarding school, half-day school that was known for only accepting the most gifted and intelligent students. To attend this school, a student would have to show how they excelled in one form or another. Intelligence was one way, but just as acceptable were those with rare and powerful quirks, exceptional talent for the arts, or other rare abilities. It was very much an elite school. Excuse me, I need to clear my throat. During the trip to the school, the day before he confronted All Might and Katsuki, his mother asked on what basis was Izuku being accepted. They didn't bother to test him, and they hadn't yet filled out paperwork to tell them about Izuku's quirk. The answer was that he was being entered on recommendation from Principal Nezu. Apparently, the Chimera was so highly respected by the principal of Kame Junior High and by the admissions board that all it took was showcasing two of his analysis books, Hero number 12 and Villain number 6, and his own personal word regarding Izuku's character to gain him admittance. He wasn't sure if that was a blessing or a curse. Therefore, he was admitted based on his analysis capabilities. The school staff was informed about the evolution of Izuku's quirk, and that the government's registration was out of date. Of course, the staff volunteered to send him one of their recommended quirk counselors, but the UA principal informed them of his own actions in that regard. Instead, they were given a list of things to watch out for. Izuku's previous experiences were mentioned only to the minimum required by law, so the faculty could be informed. It would be up to Izuku to decide if anyone would learn more about his past, which was something he resolved to divulge as little as possible. Hey Beefy, how you doing? I'm doing a podfic right now, so I won't be chatting as much, but thanks for coming and hanging out. If anyone found out about his past, he was sure the teachers would turn their backs on him. Maybe not to the extreme of that Aldera's faculty did, but still enough to ruin any chances of a normal school life in this school. Both his mother and Nezu had commented on his inability to trust others, especially adults. To the green-haired boy, this was less a symptom of psychological damage and more of a hard lesson he had learned early on. So he would be leery around, well, everyone. If no one got close, no one could disappoint him after all. But one thing would change. He had resolved to himself he would not show But one thing would change. He had resolved to himself he would not show weakness in front of other people at this new school. He couldn't help the stuttering, but he would at least keep it to a minimum and try to show more confidence. That resolution quickly came to the test as he joined the stream of day students entering the school. Several people glanced at him, obviously trying not to stare, only to turn to their friends and whisper. The greenette was wearing an Aldera uniform, as he was to be outfitted after classes that day. He knew he would stand out at first, as the uniforms were quite different. Kame's uniforms were more like suits for the men in aquamarine tones, with the ties being a darker blush tint, and the jackets being of the lighter greenish-blue variety. The shirts were white, and the female skirts were plaid with light and dark aquamarine checkered with white lines. They went down to an inch or two above the knee and looked to be winter weight. Compared to this, his tight-fitting all-black uniform with the high collar stuck out. A few students greeted him as he walked by, which he returned with a half bow and an Ohio as he continued to walk toward the school. Finally, he found a tall, stocky man at the entrance. The man appeared to be scanning the crowd with a rather thoughtful expression, at least until the man's eyes settled on Izuku. Once the man was sure he had Izuku's attention, he waved the green app forward. "You must be Midoriya Izuku," the man's deep voice rumbled in greeting. Izuku bowed deeply, making sure his new black carrying case did not hit the ground, as he confirmed his identity.
"We were expecting you. Please, come with me."
Izuku was first led to the office where he was handed his schedule. All students sat in the same room in the mornings, but were divided in the afternoons to go to different classes according to their talents. Izuku's afternoon course load contained a class on quirk theory as well as biology, physics, and choir classes. On Saturdays, which were still half days, he would be in two different classes. The first was the same quirk theory class he would have throughout the week, but the last confused him. Akagi-sensei, what is dedicated to deduction? Akagi Kentaro, as the man introduced himself, turned toward the secretary and raised an eyebrow. The woman simply nodded once, causing the man to shrug.
Dedicated deduction is an advanced analytic class. Right now it has 4 students, now 5 with you. The class reviews a variety of mysteries, ranging from previous crime cases to studies of modern-day quirks. Think of it as a practical exercise class where the students learn observation and deduction skills. You must have impressed someone to be admitted into that class. Not many can meet the requirements for it.
Of course, once the class was explained, Izuku knew how he became eligible for the class. He was just shocked that someone took his quirk analysis that seriously. He was beyond shocked people thought he was good at it. All he had ever been told was his hobby was creepy and would never be useful. To have someone not only praise his hobby, but praise his abilities? That was unheard of. One sec, y'all. Gonna light up. The shock must have shown on his face, but the tall man didn't react the way Izuku expected. Instead, he simply smiled and said,
I'm sure that you'll do fine in that class. Given this course load, you must be intelligent and insightful. That is exactly the kind of person that the teacher of this class loves to teach. That's why the class is so small, after all.
After giving Izuku a chance to compose himself and recovering from his surprise, the man said,
Well, I'd better get you to the faculty office. I'm sure your homeroom sensei is there already, and he will want to meet you before the bell rings. If we leave now, we'll be giving him just enough time.
That said, they left the office and made their way to the destination. They arrived at the faculty office, and the man opened the door.
Iga-san,
the man announced. A man with very short hair, resembling a buzz cut, looked up, then stood up immediately before bowing to the man. Vice Principal! Akagi, to what? The man stopped as he saw Izuku behind them. Walking over to a nearby couch, the teacher offered his new student and the vice principal a seat, but only Izuku took him up on the offer.
You will have to excuse me, but I need to get back to the office. Here's a copy of Midoriya-san's schedule,
the stocky man said as he handed the paper off. Izuku stood up again and gave a bow to the departing man before turning to his new homeroom teacher and bowing again. Iga held a stern, contemplative expression as he motioned for the greenette to sit down. The other teachers took this as their cue to return to their business, to allow the two a chance to speak. Izuku couldn't help but to feel nervous. In his experience, stern men normally meant trouble, and was therefore to be avoided at all costs.
Well, Midoriya-san, I've been looking over the records provided by your mother. I apologize. I have not managed to review everything. But you must know that your previous teachers and school officers did not paint a very good picture of you.
His homeroom teacher started, his eyes appearing to study the young man.
In fact, the notes left the impression that you should not even be in this prestigious school. Would you like to explain that to me?
The song-sexual teen's previously nervous feelings started to spike in fear. Great. He's judged me already by the notes on my file. So much for my fresh start here. But even as he thought that, he remembered the words spoken to him by midnight. And he tried to put his faith in those, and not his own traitorous emotions. Iga-sensei, I cannot give you many details, but the Aldera school system is about to come under investigation for Quirk discrimination and child neglect and abuse. I am a primary witness to these changes, thus the need to transfer me to another school system. The short man's eyebrow rose at that as he frowned.
So those notes are their way of discrediting you?
He asked, sounding disbelieving. Not exactly, the student responded. I'm more like a victim. It was hard for Izuku to get the last word out, and thus it was spoken softer than the rest of the sentence. He could still feel the heat rise in his cheeks as he admitted to his new teacher. He felt so weak right then. Where did his promise of confidence go? The older man's dark brown eyebrows both rose at that statement, and his eyelids widened to show green eyes. Izuku could even swear he saw something green rise from the back of the man's neck.
So you mean to tell me those notes were their attempt to undermine your education? For what reason?
Now Izuku really did not want to explain that, but he knew he had to answer or lose all credibility here. So, after a few moments, he managed to force the words out, albeit at an even thicker stutter than usual. To make my bully look like he was defending himself. His new teacher leaned backwards into the couch and blew out a stream of air.
Given the nature of the notes I've read, that sounds entirely too plausible,
the man said with a head shake.
As I mentioned, the notes and grades depicted a young man who would have never been admitted into the school. But since I did not read the full file, I likely missed any notes at the end to outline the falsehoods in that report.
The man looked his new student over, then deducted the child's current state of mind.
I am sorry. I did not mean to infer that you were inferior to anyone. Nor did I mean to give the impression that I believe those notes. I merely sought out an explanation for the conflicting story between the notes and the evidence of your admittance into the school, like the schedule, for example.
Inwardly, the swinger breathed out a sigh of relief. Okay, if Iga-sensei is telling the truth, he doesn't automatically think of me as a waste of space, he thought to himself. But he did not trust the man that easily. Still, he would attempt to accept the apology. It's fine, Iga-sensei. I understand. The man's eyes narrowed as he looked at him, and for a moment he felt as if the man could read minds.
I will try to do better going forward,
the teacher offered. No, it was obvious. The teacher understood the forgiveness was only for show.
But I do have one question I must ask, and I'm afraid it is going to be rather delicate in nature. Please understand I will not judge you based on your answer. I only ask because I will have to introduce you to the class, and after school I will take you to the uniform supplier.
Okay, Izuku answered, bracing himself for what he guessed would be coming.
Your file shows you listed as intersex, with a quirk-based notation. I've not had a chance to read the quirk description yet, but I will. Therefore, I won't ask you to give me the details of your quirk, or anything regarding corrective measures, but I do need to ask if you want your biological sex or your gender to be discussed in your introductions. Also, what pronouns do you use?
Izuku's anxiety came back again, and he looked to the floor for a moment as he considered how to answer that question. If he were completely honest with himself, he'd be guilty of trying to avoid the question completely. I just recently learned I am intersex, and tests are still being run to determine the extent. For now, can we stick to what my body shows outwardly? Miss? Iga's face fell slightly as he parsed what the teen said, but appeared to understand.
So you'll still want clothing for boys, then? I'm aware of your situation as far as therapists go. So let me just say that the way you present yourself is up to you to decide, no one else. Going by your answer to my question, I'm going to assume you want to be treated like a boy, if and until you tell me differently, okay?
Well, this floored Izuku. He was used to teachers automatically trying to make him into a girl, especially given his quirk. But still, the teacher said he didn't know about his quirk yet. So maybe that may change the man's mind. Sensei, you said you didn't read the particulars about my quirk? When the man nodded, he took a deep breath and tried to concentrate on not stuttering out a complete mess. My quirk has changed much, so the public registration is wrong. We do not have a name for it yet, but it changes the apparent sex of my body whenever I sing a certain type of song. Since I am registered for choir, you should know that there may be times that I will look like a girl. During those times, I tend to act feminine. The effects last for about 10 minutes, but it does affect my reactions and the thought processes. The man looked up at the clock and sighed before turning his attention back to Izuku.
Fascinating. So in other words, when you appear as a boy, you want to be thought of and treated as a boy. But if you ever appear as a girl, you will want to be treated as a girl, right?
After Izuku nods, embarrassingly, the teacher says,
Too bad. We only have a few minutes until the bell rings. Obviously, since you will be with me, you won't be counted as late, but I wish we had more time to discuss the quirk in detail. For there are several questions I could ask. But for now, I'll just ask, do you wish me to divulge that to the students?
At the greenette's panicked look, he adds,
We will not tolerate any bullying because of your situation. There are a few transgender kids at this school, and they are treated just like any other kid. I know you're scared, but it may be better to get this out there sooner rather than later, and I can put it in terms they'll understand.
Izuku also noticed the time and size.
Hi, Iga-sensei.
The man reached over and patted Izuku on the shoulder, before getting up and escorting him to his homeroom class. After they arrived at their classroom, the teacher indicated he should wait to be called in. The man left the door open so the teen could hear what was said. Finally, the greenette was called in and directed to stand in front of the class to introduce himself. Hello, I'm Midoriya Izuku, and I am a new transfer from Aldera Middle School. My hobby is hero studies. The teen introduced himself.
Due to a clerical error, Midoriya-san's Quirk was misfiled. I will tell you what the registration says, but please do not pester him about it,
Iga announced. He then went over what he was told by Izuku, himself in relation to the Quirk.
And that brings us to another matter,
he said as he stared briefly at a few people in the room.
When Midoriya-san is in the form he is in now, he prefers to be addressed using the masculine terms. However, when his Quirk is active, she will prefer to be addressed using the feminine terms. If you are unsure and cannot see him, it may be best to be formal and use his name instead of other terms.
The class went silent, though a few students showed something more than simple curiosity. One woman with long black hair done up in a ponytail in the back, and another girl with a short haircut that made her look like a mushroom both appeared excited for some reason, as they took in his appearance. Another boy with bicolored white and red hair appeared largely indifferent, while a tall boy with blue hair seemed to rigidly nod his head, even though he looked very thoughtful and serious.
Midoriya-san, please take a seat behind Komori-san. She is the second to the last row, closest to the hallway.
Izuku nods and makes his way to the indicated seat. As he sits down, the brown-haired girl turns around and gives him a small smile.
Good morning, Shu,
the girl whispered, before turning back to the front.
Good morning.
Izuku managed to stutter out as the boy sitting next to him, the one with the bicolored hair, only nods minutely as he pays attention to the front. Izuku inwardly winces as he gets a cold vibe from the boy and a warm vibe from the girl. But as the homeroom class goes on, he berates himself mentally for failing to appear confident. He can't help but to think the people in the class think him as weird, which causes him to shrink in on himself. So much for a fresh start. Izuku was so embarrassed over his introductions, he avoided people for the rest of the day. He was one of the first to leave for lunch, and simply got some onigiri and a pork bun before finding a place to hide. Of course, this caused him to miss the attempts of 3 people to approach him. His afternoon classes were interesting, and choir practice stuck to songs regularly sung by males. He knew the songs, but since they were of the happy variety, he didn't have enough of a connection for his Quirk to activate. Excuse me, one sec. His choir sensei did, however, pull him aside after class to ask more about the activation of his Quirk. He simply said he was seeing a Quirk counselor and would be able to tell her more later. Fortunately, or unfortunately as the case may be, choir was the last day of the class of the day for him. He avoided the brown-haired girl simply by virtue of being held back by the sensei, and then ducking his head and leaving before anything else could be said. He dreaded singing in the choir in the future. He didn't have a grasp of what his Quirk could do, and that scared him. Additionally, he was afraid of what the others would say should he be transformed in front of them. It figures. Once a worthless Deku, always a worthless Deku. He needed some time to calm down, but his mind wouldn't let him. He was about to text President Mike, but shook his head at the last minute. He doesn't want to hear about my failures today. I wouldn't be surprised if he gave up on me after this. The greenette was so lost in thought he lost track of where he was, and ended up in an unfamiliar part of Mustafu. Great, now I'm lost. More and more negative thoughts ran through his head until he found himself entering an alley and leaning against a wall. The thoughts of hopelessness continued to rise within him, and he felt the urge build within him to let it out, to sing. His mind went back to his research for a song to sing for Kotsky, and how depressing some of these songs sounded. Suddenly, his thoughts fixated on one song in particular, and before he knew it, he began to sing. So the song that he sings here is Would Anyone Care by Citizen Soldier. I do not have it in me to sing this right now, so I'm going to skip the singing parts for this video. My voice is already starting to go a little bit, and I want to keep it enough. As images of his day's failures played through his mind, Izuku started to attempt to clamp down on his quirk. There were people out in the street walking by, and he didn't want to draw attention to himself. But these images and the feelings of isolation still managed to get the attention of one girl who had been walking by. However, the depressed teen didn't notice her as he continued to wrestle with his quirk while sinking back further into the alley. Unbeknownst to the singing teen, the girl had turned to regard him before following him into the alleyway. Images of beatings and taunts by Kotsky briefly flashed, followed by images of him being mortified by his lack of confidence earlier that day. He was beyond shocked that the teachers knew so much, even if it were to be expected. Izuku felt so lonely. No images came with this part of the song first, but instead a sense of loss filled him, as he had to finally face the fact that he had no friends his age. That loneliness tore away at him, making him doubt the people who have tried to prop him up so far. He had hoped that he would make some friends at the new school, but all he could think about was that the kids there had to be laughing behind his back. He was just a wimp who couldn't even handle his own introduction. A part of him hated himself for being weak, for being indecisive. Others might see his inability to choose simple pronouns as something that was understandable. However, he just saw them as one more way he couldn't live up to his own promises. Facing that he was neither a boy nor a girl, biologically was hard, and he didn't think he could do it. He spent so long thinking of himself as a boy, that coming to grips with his reality was something he wanted no part of. Excuse me. In the meantime, the girl took out her phone and texted someone to ask them for something. After getting an affirmative answer, she put her phone away and watched the boy with wide, black eyes. She placed a large hand on the wall next to her, as she felt the emotions coming off the young man. Images were few and far in between now, as it looked like he was trying to wrestle with the quirk that had his attention. But she couldn't help but to get the thoughts that came with those feelings, and slow tears started to form as she tried to get his attention. Carol? Hello? He didn't hear her. Instead, he remembered the times he tried to show he was worth something to the teachers and kids at Aldera, just to be belittled and disgraced. He felt the sense of worthlessness as he felt as his introductions failed that day at his new school. He could feel the sense of disgust from the students sitting there, even though they didn't show it outwardly. Even the brown-haired girl who smiled and greeted him did so only out of obligation. And at that moment, his control slipped ever so slightly. The girl couldn't help ribbiting again as new images flooded her mind. The tears started to roll down her cheeks faster as a sort of desperation began to show on her normally unexpressive face. Izuku was desperate now. He needed someone to talk to, someone that could reassure him that he would make it through this. It was just so hard. Then the reason he didn't select the song for Kotsky came as the song's message would change. But Izuku couldn't find it in himself to sing the words he needed to hear. He looked up at the building in front of him, contemplating his existence. The girl grew more concerned as the song seemed to stop. and the feelings she was feeling seemed to freeze on the profound loneliness and desperation. She stood there for a few seconds, as if weighing options, before opening her mouth to sing. Her voice wasn't really good, but she felt it was the words that were more important, and that it apparently is what countered the most at that moment. Something strange happened at that point. Izuku's quirk had been hanging there, slowly fading away in an incomplete song. But when the new voice rose in the alleyway, it did so at just the right time for the quirk to latch onto the words. Izuku could feel the concern and care radiating off of the girl. He suddenly noticed standing next to him. He blinked and tried to desperately wrestle the quirk down, as this was an entirely new development and he didn't know what would happen, but it would not let him. The girl was happy that the boy had finally noticed her, though the panic on his face caused her no small amount of concern. She thought she could understand why. She felt the other's quirk grab hold of her feelings. In that instant, she tried to put as much care and concern as she could into this strange power in hopes it would reach him. Izuku's face changed in that moment, as he felt the feelings come from her. He started to smile through the tears that were pouring down his face. He felt reassured that a stranger, someone he didn't know, seemed to care that he existed. More importantly, it was someone his age, and for him that made all the difference. For the first time in, well, forever, he felt some slight confidence that he could make real friends. The green-haired girl looked Izuku straight in the eyes, trying with all her might to push the meaning behind those last words repeated in the song toward the boy who was now looking at her. She breathed a sigh of relief as she saw the small smile of gratitude form on his lips. Finally, the song faded away as she asked,
Hello, my name is Asui Suyu. Please call me Sue, kiddo.
She considered stepping forward, but decided against it. Instead, she leaned against the wall and said,
Forgive me for being blunt, but I normally speak my mind. You look like you needed a friend. Care to tell me what's wrong, kiddo?
The depressed teen sighed and turned to lean against the wall. It's a long story, he said, the remnants of the song pushing away his anxiety. I can give you a brief synopsis if you want to hear it.
Only if you promise to tell me the rest later, kiddo.
Sue said rather bluntly, but honestly.
Okay,
He said as he wondered if that meant she intended to maintain contact and become a friend. Well, you felt the effects of my quirk, but it wasn't always like this. He started before giving an abridged version of his past. He left out the worst parts and tried to downplay the bullying out of habit, but he could tell she wasn't convinced. Finally, he was about to describe the events of the day when his phone screamed, "Yeah." This startled both teens and caused the storyteller to blush. His audience, on the other hand, simply tilted her head to the side and said,
You're a Present Mike fan, kiddo?
Yeah, but I use this ringtone for specific people. One moment, please, he said as he looked at his text message. He paled again, albeit only slightly, before sighing. I need to make a phone call. But please, wait a moment. He then took a couple of steps away, motioning her to wait as he hit a number on speed dial. He talked in the phone low enough to not be completely overheard, but it was obvious he was telling someone what just happened. Nani? The now nervous teen asked loudly. After listening for another moment, he walked back to the frog girl and held out the phone towards her.
My sensei would like to talk to you. It's fine, Midoriya,
she responded plainly, though a bit of supportiveness could be read into the tone of her voice. She took the phone and answered.
Hello, kiddo? Ah, hello, little listener.
The rather loud voice answered over the phone.
I'm President Mike, Midoriya-kun's Quirk counselor. First, I'd like to thank you for helping the pre-stage performer out. He's a good kid, just had a bit of a rough life. I heard some of it, kiddo,
Sue replied as her face continued to retain its default calm setting.
He said something about that, but only a couple of sentences. Still, he mentioned something about his power calling you into it. Can you explain that to me? I don't know about pulling me in as far as forcing me to sing, kiddo, but it did seem to urge me along once I made my decision to intercede. And once it did, it seemed to pull my emotions into effect. Please understand, I tend to speak my mind. This quirk is very unusual,
she says as she watches the green-haired boy flinch slightly at that remark.
But it's not bad, just different from what I'd expect. Excuse me, I need to clear my voice. I bet he just flinched, didn't he?
The voice hero asked over the phone. At her confirmation, he said,
I know you probably have plans today, but can I ask you to join us for his training session? Between you and me, his case coordinator is worried, and she's been in contact with his mother.
The green-haired girl considers her options for a moment before asking,
Do you mind if I have a friend bring my brother and sister to meet us there? I normally watch them after school, kiddo. How does the pre-stage performer look right now after you mentioned that? I'm nervous, kiddo. But I can't tell if it's the mention of my brother and sister, or if it's over my reaction from what he's told me, kiddo. One moment.
Having discerned the hero's intent, she asks,
Your quirk counselor wants me to come to your session today. Do you mind if my friend brings my siblings there, kiddo? No, of course not,
the boy quickly exclaims. After receiving a blank look from the Osui, he says,
It's true. I may be nervous about the new people, but I trust you not to include them if there will be a problem. He says he's nervous, but willing to allow it, kiddo. Okay. Tell the pre-stage performer to bring you to my radio station. Once you get there, leave a description of your friend and your siblings at the front desk. Then bring him to the 5th floor.
The man on the phone instructs.
All right. Do you need to talk to him again? Please.
The frog girl hands the boy back his phone and gets out her own. As he finishes up the call with his caller, she makes a call to Habuko to ask her to bring her brother and sister to the radio station. After a brief conversation, she hangs up and notices that her new friend hung up about the same time.
President Mike said to go to the radio station, kiddo.
Sue already excuse me.
Alright. I looked up how to get there from here. It's this way,
the green bean says as he points in her direction. Sue already knows she's going to have a problem with keeping the boy beside her as they walk. It took a couple of short walks broken up by a short train ride to reach the Hands Up radio station building. The building itself was taller than many buildings in the area, not including the radio tower that extended even further. The radio tower itself was a landmark often used by people for directions because of this, since it can be seen for miles around. Izuku found himself grateful for this. if only for the sense of safety and stability it provided as Sue asked him more about his past. It was by unspoken agreement that she didn't ask him what happened that day, since he would be covering that soon enough with Present Mike. But as they entered, they got a surprise as Sue's friend was already there with the girl's siblings. The blood relationship between the frog teen and the two elementary-aged children was obvious. They all had similar frog quirks. But what surprised the green singer was Habuko's appearance. After all, a frog girl hugging a snake-headed girl was not something you saw every day. Still, the other girl's yellow eyes did not show any malice, just a sense of shyness, something Izuku could definitely relate to.
Habuko-chan, this is Midoriya-san.
The word startled Izuku out of his contemplations, as he had been lost in theorizing what quirk the newest girl could have.
Midoriya-san, this is my friend, Mongoose Habuko. Nice to meet you, Mongoose-san.
The nervous singer replied with a bow. Surprisingly enough, the snake-headed girl did not have a snake accent, as she bowed and replied.
Nice to meet you too, Midoriya-san.
She then let out a sigh as she turned her head to her friend and said,
I wish I could stay with you. My parents just called. I need to leave as soon as possible.
That said, the stranger gave her friend and her siblings a long goodbye before leaving.
Let's go upstairs.
The soon-to-be trainee quickly said to delay what he thought would be another awkward introduction. He really hated his anxiety sometimes. He quickly approached the desk where the secretary took a picture of him to make a permanent pass for him. Sue and her siblings had to sign in and were handed guest passes. Just then, someone came up to the desk. The approaching woman appeared bulky, but that was possibly due to her resemblance to an anthropomorphic version of a giant panda bear. A large round head set on wide shoulders with what could be called a voluptuous apple-shaped frame. While she did have fingers, they were short, while her fingernails resembled well-trimmed claws.
Hello, I am Miyuki Taiko, the manager of Hands Up Radio,
she said as she stopped in front of the group.
You must be Midoriya, Izuku, and friends. If you will follow me, I'll take you up to the 5th floor to meet Present Mike.
They followed the woman to an elevator as they entered. Introductions were made all around. It turned out that the panda lady was not only the manager of the radio station, but also a support specialist for heroes. She and Izuku were kindred spirits when it came to quirks, in that she was highly analytical and had access to many different support items to help heroes remotely. She was able to assist in the more complex problems heroes faced and was able to find out weaknesses and strengths of unknown quirks quickly. As such, she was asked by Present Mike to be present for the first few of the Greenette's quirk counseling sessions in order to answer some more technical questions. They finally arrived at a massive room that looked like it could take up nearly the entire 5th floor. There were quite a few smaller rooms to the side, and the elevator had led them out into a small lobby of sorts. The room's interior walls were all reinforced concrete and metal, and there were obvious metal shutters for the windows leading outside. Of course, the details of the room quickly grew to be irrelevant to the people standing near the entryway. In addition to Present Mike and Midnight, 2 other people stood waiting. The first was wearing what looked to be an all-black gym suit, with black shoes and a gray scarf that was wound very loosely around the man's neck several times. He had red eyes and black hair, and wore a look of utter exhaustion as he stood there assessing the entrance. The other person was a huge, hulking man of muscle wearing what could only be described as a sleeveless catsuit. The top was mainly brown with a white and orange striped centerpiece. He had on a brown skirt with an orange and brown tail stuck out the back, white gloves, and brown boots. A metallic headset that looked like long cat ears stuck out of his head. and the makeup on him was all black around the eyes with accents around the mouth to further the cat motif. He seemed to wear a concerned face as he studied Izuku.
Oh, you finally made it, Izuku-kun.
Midnight squealed before rushing forward to hug the greenette singer. She pulled back after a moment of squeezing him and looked him in the eyes.
You had a bad day, didn't you?
She asked as her concerned voice grew softer. Looking over to the girls and boy with him.
Why don't you introduce these friends of yours? Then I'll introduce the people with us. Then we can figure out what's bothering you, okay?
While Izuku wasn't sure he could call any of the three people he came up with friends, he didn't want to insult them by saying anything to the contrary. So, while Miyuki went to get everyone something to drink, the green-haired boy began.
Well, I just met them, but she helped me quite a bit,
he replied, indicating the frog teen with him.
This is Asuisu's son, her younger brother Samidare's son, and her younger sister Satsuki's son. Hello, Kera.
The eldest of the Asui family present said as she bowed.
I'm sorry to have included my brother and sister without asking, but I am responsible for them after school, and given how I found Midoriya-san, I didn't feel right leaving them alone. No, it's okay.
The R-rated heroine said.
We'll just make sure we all know each other. I'm Midnight. The man with tall, spiked blonde hair is Present Night. The man with the scarf is Eraserhead. And the man in the cat suit is Tiger from the Wild Pussycats.
The other two heroes gave small waves as they were introduced. Once all of them were introduced, she took the bottles from Miyuki and began passing them along while Mike waved to the newcomers. Some chairs were quickly brought forward so everyone could sit. So, Mike said loudly, causing Eraserhead to wince. How much do you little listeners know about the pre-concert performers' problems? The voice hero's volume dropped a little as he became a bit more serious.
Samidare and Satsuki-san don't know anything, Kero.
Asui spoke up.
But I have probably been told some small amount of Midoriya-san's past by Midoriya-san himself after I found him in the alleyway singing.
Midnight's shoulders slumped as she bent down and placed her hands on the teen boy's lap.
Why didn't you call me, Izuku-kun? I didn't want to worry you.
The boy replied quietly as he blushed and looked to the side away from the hero. That's illogical. The perpetually tired hero spoke up. Kid, you worry us adults more when we find out you're hurting and don't contact us. When he notices Mike's raised eyebrow in his direction, he says, It's better to fix irrational feelings now.
As odd as it sounds coming from him,
the R-rated hero teased.
He's right. I'd rather hear about something minor I can fix from you before it drives you to such depths. What song were you singing? Would anyone care?
The boy mumbled.
Isn't that the other song you had chosen for Bakugos?
Imuri asked. At Izuku's nod, she closed her eyes for a moment as a tear rolled down her face.
Oh, Zuko, what happened?
Wait, Tiger spoke up. Asui-san, this is likely to be a sensitive subject, and not one for younger children. Do you think they should stay? Or should we find something for them to do? At this point, the panda lady came up to the smaller two Asuis and said,
How about I take you two on a tour of the station while the adults talk to your sister and your friend about some adult stuff? Will Midoriya and Nissan be okay?
Satsuki asked worriedly. She didn't understand everything, obviously, but she knew enough to know the boy was upset.
He'll be okay, kiddo.
Sue responded as she turned to them.
Please, go along with the manager-san here.
She and Miyuki shared a nod before the younger ones were pulled away. Is it okay for the eldest Asui-san to stay? The Erasure Hero asked for verification.
Hi.
Izuku replied. The frog girl gave the vocal boy a small smile as he closed his eyes and tried to relax and focus on his speech to reduce the stuttering. It was hard with all the new people, but with Namiri there, he knew that he'd be okay. I had promised myself that today would be the start of my new self with the start of a new school. From there he gave his version of the events of the day, taking care to summarize but not leaving anything out. He couldn't help but to stutter when the topic of his gender identity came up, as he had not told his new friend about that. But somehow her calm, unchanging face reassured him more than he would have thought possible. Finally, the story ended with what happened in the alleyway, and with Sue completing the song. The room was drowned in silence for a couple of minutes as each person absorbed what had happened. But the frog girl was the first to speak.
As you know, I tend to speak my mind.
She began more for the adults' benefit than for the boys.
I have to say that you were too hard on yourself, kiddo. I know I can't really understand the amount of anxiety you experience based on your past. But if you'll put your mind at ease, I'm not repulsed by any of what you just said. In fact, I think you're kind of brave.
Brave? How? A surprised Gainnet boy exclaimed.
You're still here, and you took a step to try again, kiddo.
Sue immediately answered.
Even though you were sure you were going to fail, you still tried.
She's right,
the muscular cat man said as he leaned forward.
Believe me, I know better than anyone else here, but you know...
excuse me.
Believe me, I know better than anyone else here, but you, how hard dealing with gender issues is. I'm transgender myself.
Izuku couldn't help but to blink at the man's declaration before giving Midnight a meaningful glance. At her nod, he turned his attention back to the leaning hero.
But you can't just automatically assume what your classmates will think. It will be hard as anything you've ever done. But I think you should go back to school tomorrow and really study what the other students' reactions are towards you.
Look, kid, the man with the scarf said as he knelt down beside Midnight.
One thing these two taught me is if you base your expectations off what happened in the past, you prove your tormentors right. Then they win, and you'll never be free. You need to wait and watch to see how they react first. Not everyone is going to turn their back on you. She didn't, he added, pointing towards Sue.
Hey, pre-concert performer. Before we get started today, there's two things I want to do. Who knows? It may help you relax a bit. Yes, Mike-sensei? First is based off an old study, dating back to before the dawn of quirks. Did you know that fear and excitement share many of the same physiological reactions?
Both teens blinked at this, looked at each other, then back to the speaking hero before shaking their heads.
It's true. So before we get started today, and before facing something that fills you with anxiety, I want you to say to yourself, I'm not afraid, I'm excited. Can you do that for me? I'm not afraid, I'm excited. Again, louder and without the stutter. I'm not afraid, I'm excited. Better. Now, one more time with feeling.
Both the voice hero and the R-rated hero cheered.
I'm not afraid. I'm excited. Yeah, there we go.
This got a reaction out of Eraserhead, whose quirk activated to save the hearing of everyone in the room. Now, the last thing I want you to do is sing a specific song for me. I want you to really think about this song. I want to see it become your anthem. It's okay if it takes a while, but if you feel like you're being overwhelmed, I want you to say that phrase and think of this song. Will you sing it for us now? Person Mike picked up a folder out of a bag by his feet and deftly picked out a few sheets of music to hand over to the greenette. Sue leaned over to look at the song, even as the vocal quirk user read the title. The two teens looked at each other before the frog girl spoke up.
I think he may be onto something here, kiddo. It can't hurt.
After studying the song for a moment, he pulled out his music player to search for it. He found 2 copies, one with just the music and the other with the music and the song. As he listened to it, he paled for a moment and glanced over to Asui. I haven't told her the specifics of my quirk yet. The girl he was quickly becoming to think of as his friend blinked once and asked,
Is there more to it than just transmitting thoughts and memories, kiddo?
Izuku nodded rapidly, obviously nervous about the rest.
Well, I'd like to be your friend, kiddo. I promise I won't shame you, no matter what it is. Please, let me be here with you.
After studying the other teen for a moment, Izuku sighed and listened through the song once as he read the sheet score.
So, in the future I should think the song in my head, and not sing it, right, Sensei? Yeah, there's no sense in wasting a transformation at any other time. But if you transform now, we can test a few things. Well, I found a cover by an idol singer today, so I'll probably turn that into that person instead of whoever originally performed this.
The green bean said defeatedly.
I'll try.
He gave one last look at the girl who came with him and said,
Please don't freak out.
Alright, so the song he sings here is Fight Song by Rachel Platten. Izuku was enveloped in a bright light as his quirk took effect. He could feel his body shifting as it morphed into a teen with long strawberry blonde hair. She had a green frilly dress that spread out on her hips and stopped at mid-thigh, with white hose and green pump shoes. While her eyes remained green, they started to sparkle slowly and lightly as a smile crept out across her face.
Kiddo?
Asui gasped as she saw this transformation. She was obviously surprised, but some things that the boy had skipped over and the story from earlier started to make a lot more sense. The now obviously female vocal artist started to dance from side to side as the music picked up. Her smile grew wider as her hands started to grasp her head and made a small circle with it. Her new friend felt the urge to join her, not because of the quirk, but because she really, really liked the song.
I think you're onto something, Present Mike, kiddo.
The normally gruff Aizawa did not allow a small smile to form on his face. Absolutely not. He had been filled in on the basics of what was going on, and it was obvious from his observations that Namiri was right when she talked about similar childhoods. They may have had to take different paths to deal with it, but it was obvious that Midoriya Izuku had found another ally in this fight. At the same time, Tiger simply brought up a fist in front of him in salute, even as he started to dance. He turned his head to look at Midnight and nodded to her in affirmation of something, even as the vocal artist continued to sing. Now the idol look-alike started to sing as the second rendition of the chorus started to be sung. Small flashes of light, like sparkles, haloed around the dancing idol. Sue recognized them as part of the quirk belonging to the actual idol.
She can mimic quirks?
She exclaimed as she looked at Midnight and Present Mike. But both heroes looked just as shocked as she felt. So this must have been new to them too. The others collected in front of the singing teen looked at the performer in shock, but the teen didn't seem to notice. The frog teen absentmindedly realized that the current performer of the song was older than her friend appeared, and the flashes of light weren't as bright or frequent as what was shown at the live performance. She looked between the rest gathered and knew analyzing this quirk was going to be interesting, and she wasn't really interested in quirk analysis either. In fact, Sue found herself clapping along and singing back up to the quirk user as the song went through the dramatic final bars. As the song faded, everyone noticed the teen still did not change back to a boy. It was only then the performer noticed the shocked looks on everyone else's faces.
What?
Girl Izuku asked the room confidently. Alright, y'all. I really, really hope you guys enjoyed the chapter as much as I did. We're definitely going to cut that episode of the podfic there. We've been going on this one for a little over an hour. So, I really hope you guys enjoyed the video. For those of you watching on Twitch, this will be uploaded to YouTube probably later today at some point. And yeah. Ciao for now, YouTube.